Welcome everyone to Unscripted Coding. Today we're going to talk about costs, just how much are these models costing you. And what we're going to build or modify at the very end of this is a very quick, simple calculator. But let me just intro this very quickly to say, AI is really awesome. That's why we've been building so many projects around them. But at the same time, they can get quite pricey as soon as you start scaling the number of users, the amount you use. For me, personally, using GPT-4 Turbo here and there is not a big deal. It'll be maybe a couple bucks a month. But if you start having 2, 5, 10, 20, 100 users, that starts becoming hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. And these models differ quite a bit. If you think about GPT 3.5 Turbo, we know that it's a smaller, older, crappier model. But moving between it and GPT-4 Turbo, the difference is, let's just take input tokens for now, 50 cents for a million tokens versus $10 for a million tokens. So it's a factor of 20. You are paying 20 times more for every word, every sentence, every paragraph you put into that chatbot. And then GPT-4 is a difference of, what is that, 50 cents and $30. That's a factor of 60. So it starts adding up, and you want to start comparing with other providers and other models. Now, if you're all within the open AI ecosystem, which I used to be most of the time, this is fairly easy and intuitive to understand. 50 cents versus $30, same measure, no conversion necessary. But if you start looking at other models, they're measuring it slightly differently. So I'm going to take Gemini 1.5 Pro, that's Google's model, very quickly, and look at the text input here. It's 0.25 cents for 1,000 characters. Number one, the measure is different. 1,000 versus a million. And characters, I think there are 4 characters for every token. So this is actually 250 tokens out of the 1 million tokens that OpenAI measures from. Again, slight clash, slightly different. This one isn't the worst thing in the world, but now we're entering the multimodal stage where Gemini is able to accept images, video, audio, and who knows what else you can start adding to it. For me, I only just started playing around with the image input. I haven't gotten to audio or video yet, but those measures are quite different. So here, Google is nice and simple. 0.265 cents an image. Flat price, easy to understand. OpenAI does this tiling thing where, let's say you have 512 pixels by 512 pixels. It's going to be 0.255 cents. That is one 512 by 512 tile. But as soon as you bump this up to 513, you're going to see that, the price has went up dramatically because it has done 2 tiles now. There's one 512 by 512 and then one tile that just catches that one last line of pixels on the side. And then, you can have 1920 by 1080, for example, and then it starts tiling to figure things out. Claude measures it quite differently as well. You'll see here that it is a width times height divided by 750. It is an equation you have to figure out. So these things start to become quite difficult. And what I needed to do was very quickly figure out, let's say on average, I use about 10 images. I have scaled them all down to 512 by 512 for GPT-4 purposes. And let's say it's 500 words input and I just want about 350 words output. I can calculate the cost, and very quickly you get a comparison here with Claude 3 Haiku being the cheapest. You'll see that I'm obviously missing a ton of models, especially the free low-cost ones. But really, I was just playing around with these image costs in particular and competitive, well-known models. Anyways, what we wanted to do what I wanted to show you is that I built, I use this word very loosely now, through ChatGPT 4. So I asked it to write a simple HTML single page application with JavaScript, blah, blah, blah. It started with a very simple framework, and this is when I started adding pieces to it. So I said, this is how GPT-4 charges. It's $10 per million input. I should zoom in a little bit for you. And I also talked about this tiling situation. And so it figured things out, did the calculations, and then we could scroll all the way down where I went through a couple iterations to say, now please add bootstrap to it. Please center the chart. Please change the descriptions, whatever, rearrange the rows and columns. So at the end, I got to this with a bit of manual changes, to be fair. So it was virtually all done by ChatGPT 4, which is good. What I wanted to do is just keep going with this process to show you guys how simple it is, because I originally thought, let's try and figure this out on Excel, which is typically how I do this math. But I realize now that ChatGPT isn't particularly good with working with Excel files. It's much better either doing the Python calculations itself or writing something like this in JavaScript. So in the future, if you're doing a presentation, if you gotta figure out calculations and you want AI to do it, maybe turn your thinking a little bit and go web development rather than Excel dashboard, because everybody wants a bit of interactivity. What I wanted to do very quickly here is I wanted to say, here is my current code, and I've pasted the whole thing. And what I wanted to do is change the text input and output into sliders. Can you change the input for, what was it again? Text input and text output. Text input and text output into sliders instead of and we're just going to see how it goes here. So it's got quite a bit to work with, and it's going to take a bit of time to read. And you could start changing a bunch of this. I might ask it to put a header, a footer. I might add more models. And in fact, if you look back to the top, which isn't going to play nicely, what I did was add one model at a time to make it manageable for it to understand, and also for me to double check its math each time around, so I could enter a couple fields at a time. Okay, so it's going to keep going for a little bit. What I wanted to do while that was happening is just walk through the code and show you guys that it was really, really simply done. It did several inputs. It uses Bootstrap very quickly, and then it has a table underneath. You'll see that each cost is calculated. I was not super impressed with how it was calculating costs, because each time it looked quite different. So you'll see here just very quickly getting the fields, the values out of each input field. And then here, these two are consistent because they're both GPT-4. You have cost per million tokens, and then you multiply it through and you add it together. Here, as soon as you hit Gemini, you can see that instead of having cost per million token input, it now has, the actual cost all done here and then adding them separately. So instead of having a dedicated value for its cost, it now has that value over here as part of an equation already. So I don't really like that. And then Claude 3 also done very differently, and split into a separate function actually. Claude is actually the more interesting one of the few because they have a straight up calculation. I think GPT-4 Turbo is the more difficult one to calculate, but this one gives costs that differ quite a bit from GPT-4 Turbo. So it threw out my calculations a little bit and my assumptions as soon as you got into larger and larger number of images. So it looks like we don't have to deal with the table. We just need to take the button and above, move it here. Let's scroll back up. Button and above. I think that's it. Good. Let's save and refresh and see how we go here. So, ooh, that gets quite large. Let's see if we reduce the text input, the cost should go down. Very good. And so you can see I can keep customizing this. I'm realizing right now that I might want to change all three of these into sliders and just have it calculate as I change the sliders. But I'm going to stop this video right now because I don't think you need to hear me kind of rumble on more. But main point here, actually two main takeaways. Number one is the pricing for these things are all over the place, and if you play around with a lot of AI, might be worth doing something similar to figure out where all your costs are, because I'm starting to see my costs really balloon and I got to figure out how to optimize it. Second one is if you're doing these calculations, Excel is definitely one way, but what's getting easier and easier is just tossing it into chat-gpt and letting AI figure it all out. Do double check the math. The first time around, it was quite wrong. I think it's partly my fault in how I explained it to chat-gpt, but it's very wrong. So double check the math, but it makes for a very easy kind of modeling situation. I hope you found that helpful. This is a simpler project than we normally do, but nonetheless, hopefully you found it interesting and helpful. I'll see you next week with yet another project.